Now, this video is part of a 5-part video series whereby I'm going to tell you about my most toxic manager, who was like a liberal white male, the kind of leftist type of woke ideology you're typically used to seeing at some of these protests and things like that. Typically like your kind of, you know, your Tim Waltz type of guy, if we're going to use a reference, a Bernie Sanders type of guy, but who is in his early 30s, early mid 30s. Now, kind of interesting personality. So just to clarify, you know, based on the title of this video, I used to work at Goldman Sachs. I am ex-Goldman Sachs, as you know from my channel, but this is not a story that actually happened at Goldman Sachs, of course. It's just a general story about my experience in the finance industry as a high value, high status alpha male in investment banking and sales and trading. So just to clarify the title, I'm someone who worked at Goldman Sachs, but this story definitely did not happen at Goldman Sachs. This is part of a 5-part video series I'll release over the next few weeks or months. So let me tell you, in this video, you know, I'm going to let you know about very difficult experience of dealing with this personality in the corporate environment who's a toxic manager. Just to make it a bit more funny and interesting, I'll use some nicknames for some of the people. Let's call a manager I was dealing with Mickey Goofball. Hopefully I'll put an image on the screen right now. He was kind of a messed up guy, had lots of personal issues going on that played out in the workplace environment, always conscious about the way he looked and his age. And I want to share all of the stories with you over the next 5 videos of this series, is because, you know, I've been through some of the same struggles you've been through, right? And I want to share some helpful tips to get through it. And if you're new to the channel, I'm someone who's worked in the finance industry for over 10 years at director level. I've worked in Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, HSBC in sales and trading. You can look into my background, link in description. But I offer a coaching program, right? And that coaching program is when I work with a client one-on-one for over 12 weeks. And I teach them how to outsmart office politics, increase their salary, and take control over their career, right? So if you're going to relate to the story I'm going to share and you're used to dealing with a toxic manager, I've been there before. I'll show you how to identify the red flags of the personality types, protect your reputation, and move into roles that are going to help you earn more and give you more money and spend less time draining your energy over really toxic people. So there's a link in description if you want to work with me directly. So let me tell you about this. So these are the type of red flags to look out for. I'm going to share with you multiple lessons. The first one is during the interview phase. I did about 9 or so interviews for this particular role in investment banking, and it was over 3 to 4 rounds of interviews before I got the job offer in the end. But I remember he was one of the earlier interviews, and they weren't clear to me exactly, and they said themselves quite openly to me, we're not exactly sure what role we want to put you in, because there's multiple roles we're hiring for in this team, but it depends on where the demand is from the business, what we really need to get done, and on that basis we'll decide where you should fit on the team. And that's why it was a bit awkward doing some of the interviews, because it was like, what exactly is the role going to involve? And I say all that because when he interviewed me, it wasn't clear he would be my direct line manager. He would be one of the team members, and I didn't get a good vibe from him, even though I ended up getting the job in the end. It was because the manager just one level above him, who's called Paddle Ping, who I'll mention throughout the video, he was essentially big in playing paddle, and he was also a senior manager at this particular investment bank. So what ended up happening is, when I was doing this interview with Mickey Goofball, I could tell he was a bit kind of stressed. They had certain red flags that told me maybe he isn't happy in his life, or maybe he isn't happy with the job or stressed out. But these are the type of things that you're in an interview, it's maybe for a big major company, you end up overlooking it because you just want to work for the company. You just essentially want to be able to get that role. So what are early warning signs you should look out for someone who can be a toxic co-worker or manager, right? If they have poor hygiene, if they constantly look scruffy. Now, everyone has a bad day where they might not look their best, but if someone's consistently like that, it's kind of a red flag that they're very disorganized in their life, or over emotional and overreactive because they can't maintain basic good life practices. But let me continue with this. So essentially, he seemed on edge a lot in the interview, right? Not necessarily stressed with me, but just generally stressed. Not a lot of chill, not a lot of like calm confidence, which you look to have as someone who would be in a corporate environment, but he looked like he was doing quite well because he was around vice president level at that point. So he must have been doing something quite right. He asked relatively simple interview questions to me. He didn't seem like he was really trying to push me into asking difficult questions, but he does come across as someone who could be like generally negative. That was the vibe he was giving across, right? And I learned that like later in the video we'll learn about some of his negative nature. But one thing that was super weird about him that I picked up on, and this is going to sound a bit crazy to mention, but he did this thing in the job interview and perpetually throughout working with him for 3 or 4 years, where he would have the first few buttons of his shirt unbuttoned and he'd be scratching his chest, and he had a lot of chest hair, which is a bit weird to mention, but I always think how he had really scruffy hair, really scruffy beard. He was scratching his chest hair, and I was thinking, this guy is really conducting himself like someone who could look like a hobo on the street, even though he's working in a major investment bank, helping manage billions of dollars of risk. How can he get away with that continuously? Like, there are so many red flags about this guy. You think management would tell him, you need to dress more professionally, you need to look more professional if you want to make it further, but they just put up with his nature time and time again. And I understand he had a lot of technical expertise, so management put up with him, but it was a bit excessive because we're going to learn more about him shouting and swearing and things like that. And one thing I want to point out is this type of liberal male that you see in the workplace, the kind of leftist guy. There's no other way of describing them. The soy boys, the bug men, things like that. The last man that Nietzsche talks about, simps, beta orbiters, whatever word you want to use, shitlib, things like that. They are often the problem in the workplace environment. They can be quite over emotional, quite vindictive and petty. They're a man who has some traditionally negative female behavior, right? You might have a man who's like petty and jealous and bitchy and gossipy, and you might expect a bit of that from a woman, but you got a lot of guys who are behaving like that. The same way the roles are kind of reversed. Sometimes you have women who are aggressive, which you wouldn't expect, and then you have men who are behaving over emotional and bitchy, which you wouldn't expect. It's like men with negative female traits are quite common these days. And it's funny because people complain about the right-wing guys, the chuds, the incels, whatever it would be, but I mean, obviously you can't tell everyone's political opinion or leanings, but a lot of those guys want to go to work, get their work done, stay out of the corporate culture or the kind of leftist socializing culture, and just get on with their work. So they're not necessarily a problem. It's normally a lot of these male feminist types, these single soy boys, and there were other guys like this on the team that would be over socializing at work, right? If you're familiar with, Ted Kaczynski, he talks about these guys who are over socializing all the time. There's typically covering up for like some level of insecurity or unhappiness within their personal life. And he came across like someone who had a successful career, but his personal life was quite dysfunctional. He just gave off that vibe continuously, and he would reveal it to me later. And I could tell from some of the questions he was asking, he was big on like going to work drinks with others and socializing, and typically mixing personal life with their work life because they have no choice and they don't have much going on in their personal life outside of work. They create a messy dynamic where all their personal life they're discussing with their co-workers, and even particularly female co-workers, and then everyone knows everything going on in their life, and it just becomes a very messy situation. And most guys, if you're watching my channel, you know how important it is to create that boundary between your personal life and your work life, because you discuss some of your personal life at work, all of a sudden someone wants to take a dig at you, they're going to take a cheap shot at your personal life, something you told them maybe in confidence, or you think they wouldn't stoop to that level to have a go at you or your family or something, or your relationship status. So the first lesson here is when you're interviewing somewhere, what signs can you pick up on the interview phase about the people and the company culture, right? So is it generally negative? Does it seem stressful? Does it seem very restrictive? What tone of voice are they using? Are they sounding stressed all the time and sighing and things like that? Who's exactly going to be your direct manager? Now that time they thought Paddle Ping was going to be my manager, but it ended up being Mickey Goofball. And when you have this lack of clarity, it really puts you on a lot of pressure, because you're like, there's so much uncertainty there, and you should really try to get as much clarity as possible. Another thing you want to learn is how big is the team? And again, these are questions you could ask at the end of the first interview. Where do I sit within the team? And the reason why you want to know that, typically if they have a big team, is because they have tons of people with high turnover and you're doing very generic tasks like reviewing cases on a time-by-time basis, on a time basis, or reviewing like trading surveillance alerts. Typically those things where they have massive teams, you don't have a high skill level and they just want anyone to do the job and review certain alerts. But if you have a smaller team, it might be like, okay, who am I working more directly on a day-to-day basis in the role? And what ended up happening, becoming clearer to me after I joined, because they weren't sure how to organize the team, I'd be working alongside this specific guy, Mickey Goofball, who would eventually become my official manager about a year into the job. And the other people that I interviewed with, who I got on quite well with, there was an Asian guy, couple Asian guys, one from South India, one from China, even though they'd been in like the UK their whole lives and kind of westernized, same way I have been. I couldn't really work with them too closely because they had another junior employee working with them. So it's a bit of an awkward vibe. So this is the thing, you got to pick up on all of these little signals. Like you can ask little questions. How big is the team? Who would be my direct line manager? How would I work alongside these other people that were interviewing me? I could have asked them, I did ask them a few questions. Or how does your part of the team interact with ours? Are we working together on a daily basis or only certain joint projects? That's how you can pick up with where do I sit on the team and who am I working with. Then you got to ask, and you can find out this again through whether it's direct questions or the general vibe, or through information on the job description, your discussions with HR and recruiting managers. What exactly is your role on the team, your level of seniority and autonomy in the role? And also you've got to read in between the lines. Are you going to be able to work the job without a micromanager? Or are you going to have someone lording over you and telling you what to think and how to do every little thing? So next we're going to go through my first few months in the role. So I got the job offer at this major investment bank. I was quite eager to start. I was about halfway through my career. Now, the thing is, in the first few months, there was not much talking, even though I was sitting next to Mickey Goofball, right? I was trying to create a bit of a rapport, but there wasn't much going on. And then the manager above, who was called Paddle Ping, we'll use that term for now. He was officially my manager, but he was always busy. So I was kind of at the work, going into the sales and trading floor at my desk without much instructions, just given kind of generic tasks to do and sit at the desk for months. And it was very awkward because it's like they just hired me for the role. They weren't sure what I was meant to be doing, but I just had to review tons of like communication between traders and salespeople and other brokers and banks to make sure there's no collusion or insider trading or any type of improper activity, which I understand just to get me comfortable with the role. But it was like I was going in almost like a contract worker, even though I was a permanent hire, a member of the team. They just kind of like dumped me in one corner of the team just to sit there going through all this communication, and months had gone by like that. Even though I was trying to get involved in different things, they didn't want me to get involved in things, and it's a bit awkward. It's like you just hired me to do this type of advisory type of role, but you just want me to sit and do this for now. Okay, I just got on with it. And then what ended up happening is this guy, Mickey Goofball, who ended up being my manager, always said that, it overly came over time, is that Paddle Ping would say, look, I don't think you're kind of co-worker who's technically informally your manager, Mickey, he doesn't think you respect him as a person, right? And it was like, I need to show him more respect in the role. And I was thinking, firstly, this guy's not speaking with me much, even though I tried to initiate conversation with Mickey. We're not actually working on any joint projects, even though I'm technically meant to be working for him. I've just been given this generic role that the team needs done, which is reviewing a lot of communication and things like that. So what am I meant to do here? So how am I meant to show him respect and manage my manager, which is the type of BS wording you get. So it became very awkward, right? It's like, I'm not here to fulfill another employee's insecurities, that they need more respect, they need more attention. And that's what it became. Like, this guy came across like very insecure, always looking for respect and attention from others. And it was just weird. It's like, what are you meant to do with that? I don't even know who to describe that as, but what you meant to describe that guy as a soy boy, a bug man, I don't know. So it ended up happening is that sometimes that he would give me tasks, Mickey would give me tasks sometimes, and sometimes it'd go well, and sometimes he would just completely flip out. And he'd never given me any training. I'd been on the job for months, I haven't got any training. So sometimes I would complete tasks and he'll give positive feedback, and some tasks he wouldn't be clear with the instructions. So sometimes I would respond in a long email with detailed answers. Sometimes I'd give a short email because he never clarified what he wanted. And also I was working on that long, cumbersome task that was taking the majority of the day, reviewing a lot of communication between traders and salespeople, looking for any identification of improper practice, which was to protect the bank from, manipulative trading, things like that. So what ended up happening is he would just flip out, but he would never give clear instructions what he wanted, and he would never train me on anything. So I basically had to figure things out myself, right? So certain acronyms within finance, like MBS, could mean different things, mortgage-backed securities or other things, and he wouldn't explain things. He would just, I can't remember if he said it directly or I just ended up doing it. I think he did say it directly, or you can just Google that to find it out. So it's like, what's the point of starting here? If you're the manager, you're not going to explain anything. So I just had to learn all these things myself, do a lot of research, do a lot of reading around the topic, spending time on the weekend learning things. And I don't mind doing that to a certain extent, but it was like he was being deliberately unhelpful, and then we're on the spot and I don't know the answer to a question because I haven't been trained, and I just basically had to become a self-taught employee there. And what I ended up learning later on, which I'll cover in the other videos, is that other employees had the same experience with him, so it wasn't just me. And what was also awkward is that he wouldn't answer my questions. So often he'd be sitting next to me, because we were sitting next to each other every day, and I'd ask him some questions and he'd ignore me. He would just look at the desk, look at his desk, look at his monitor, and I'd be right next to him asking him a question like this. Oh, so can you explain mortgage-backed securities in a bit of detail to me? And he'd just sit there at his desk, pretend I'd never said anything. He didn't have like his headphones on or on a call. He would do this all the time. So he'd just blank me. And this happened dozens and dozens of times, to the point where I just got annoyed and I just mind my business and I started talking with him lesser than I already did. And then he would only answer my questions when management came around. So when our team manager, Paddle Ping, came around, he would just start answering my questions, be friendly and helpful. Otherwise, he would just completely ignore me and blank me, right? And I realized time and time again, as we'll cover in other videos and later in this video, he had this behavior with loads of people. He would always undermine people and rug pull people and take advantage of people unless management were present. Then he'd pretend to be a nice team player. So again, so you'd only tell me you only help me and provide help and explain things when the team manager, Paddle Ping, was around. And what would happen is he would constantly be unprofessional, and not just with respect to me, but with respect to people in general. He would often shout and swear on the phone with others. He would often agree. So in terms of shouting and swearing, this would happen very often. He'd be on phone calls, shouting, swearing, cursing people out. And this was like completely unnecessary, because I can gauge, even though I was new to the team, what is like a serious issue and not a serious issue. And he would just get away with this kind of wild behavior. And I assume this is all because he had good technical skills that management needed, but you'd have this unnecessary emotional outburst. There are times and places for that, but this wasn't it. And I could tell this guy was just some weird guy being over the top because he had some kind of weird insecurities. He wanted to prove himself and spread this kind of negative, controlling energy on others. It was very weird. And then what ended up happening is I often noticed his behavior with others, and this happened twice from two major examples. He would agree something with another team member at his level, not including me, something else, right? So he'd agree with maybe another team member that, okay, we're going to move forward with this financial transaction. This is the analysis we did, and we're going to sign off on it. And then when it comes back to reviewing it later, like the manager, Paddle Ping, is going to look through it and identify some holes and mistakes or like potential risk they didn't identify, he would completely lie and say, no, I didn't agree on that. I don't remember agreeing on that. Or maybe he did. Maybe the other guy did on the team, right? Not me, someone else. Or maybe he agreed with it. And the other guy will say, no, we discussed it and I was even present, so I know they agreed on this. But he'd walk it back and pretend he didn't. Anytime in front of management, he would just dump the problem on someone else, pretend to be fake nice to someone, anything to look good in front of management, right? Completely reverse his position, saying he didn't agree what he previously did in a meeting. And his whole thing was being someone who's sucking up to management, being shown as having good technical skills, and being on good terms with other teams that were important, like sales and trading teams. But within our team, he would be incredibly manipulative with anyone who's at his level or below. And what was quite interesting then is that another example of this is he had a brief conversation at the desk with a co-worker, and they said, okay, we just interviewed some other people for other jobs on the team. This is my view on him, of the new candidate. What's your view? And then they would agree, yeah, we agree with that person was a good candidate. We should hire them. And then when presenting that in front of senior management in a team meeting, the manager might have a different opinion, and then he'd instantly flip and agree with the manager and disagree with the coworker he just agreed with before. And the whole point of that is, before you go to a meeting with senior management, and this is a good lesson for your career, is that you want to agree things with people at your level, so you're not shown to be on different sides of the coin or have different opinions in front of management. You want to have a cohesive level of agreement. You're on the same page, you analyzed it before, you're presenting a very short, detailed, to the point analysis to the manager, even something simple like hiring someone. Yeah, we both agree we want to hire this new employee because he has XYZ technical skills. He had a good rapport with us. We asked him how he deals with difficult circumstances, like a difficult trader or salesperson, and he answered that question well. You want to be on the same page and give the key info to management so they can just say yes and tick off on it. But when he started doing stuff like that, I was like, okay, this is a reoccurring pattern, right? And these are red flags to look out for. How are they engaging with other people, right? And then you have to adjust to that and not just be naive and be like, maybe he won't be like that with me. It's a bit like, and this is sad to say, but you might have friends or family members who are persistent liars, right? Or narcissists, which is a big topic online these days. Or you have people who are undercutting and manipulating others, lying to others. And you might think, oh, they'd never do that to me. Oh, I'm their friend, I'm their family member. But the same kind of shortcuts they might take with others, they're likely to do with you. I wouldn't be too naive and think, oh, they wouldn't do that to me. And then other things I noticed is that when I questioned his conduct, because I was trying to focus, I was reviewing a lot, like thousands of internal communications, right, over the course of a week. And when he was being so loud on calls, swearing, being unprofessional, and it made it hard for me to concentrate and do my job. And I said, why are you like being so over the top and like shouting and swearing all the time? And he flipped out on me. He didn't like it. So it's like, I'm not actually doing anything wrong. I'm coming into work on time, leaving on time, doing the work after me. Trying to engage in a conversation with this guy who's being quite difficult, who has a reputation for being difficult and lying to others, and is like, I can't even do my job and focus because this guy's going to be shouting and swearing all the time, right? And then he started raising pointless issues with my performance. His biggest issue with me seemed to be that I didn't seem too enthusiastic about the job, right? That I was just kind of keeping quiet, keeping my head down and being focused on the job. He wanted me to emotionally show my enthusiasm for the job. Now, if you watch the channel, you can see sometimes I'm expressive, I'm joking about things. Sometimes, a lot of the time, I'm quite emotionally neutral. And I've learned to be like that through life, like I'm sure many of you have, particularly if you're a man and you're living in this society. There's so many volatile ups and downs in your job, dealing with a layoff, dealing with financial issues, dealing with social people who could be manipulative, even outside of work. You've learned to be stoic, and there's a reason why the term stoic, S-T-O-I-C, which I'm sure a lot of you are aware of, is become such a big thing within the men's self-improvement space or just in general online, because people are like, okay, cool, well, I just kind of need to be somewhat emotionally detached from all the media propaganda, social media, things trying to trigger you and get you to react emotionally with the attention economy and things like that. So it's very difficult when you're perpetually dealing with these type of over-emotional men in this case, when you're like, okay, you're having a go at me for not being too emotional about the work, right? Being stoic is really a benefit to have. Being calm is really a benefit to have, particularly when you're on the trading floor, you're dealing with all types of sensitive issues and even a lot of political volatility that was creating volatility in the work we're doing and the output. Like Brexit was happening around the time. The first election for Trump in 2016 was happening around the time. There's lots of kind of tense situations, which I'm not saying we've discussed politically, but are impacting the economy and the trading systems and the trading strategies and things like that. So, and even where our teams are going to be based, because we were in London and we didn't end up relocating to Frankfurt, but many teams did set up in Frankfurt and on mainland Europe because of Brexit. So it's like someone being emotionally neutral like me, it should be seen as a benefit rather than this over emotional, crazy, volatile guy. And they just didn't seem to get it that, like, me being quite stoic and straight-faced, because it was naturally my personality, doesn't mean I don't care about the job. And this is what I mean. When a company is looking to have an issue with you, they won't be able to find issues with the work you're doing. Typically, if you watch my channel, I know from the comments, a lot of people are good at their job, and then the company finds some ridiculous reason to have a problem with you. Oh, you don't smile enough. Oh, you don't seem too enthusiastic about the work. And you're like, well, I'm doing the work and the work's done. You can't find any problems with the work, but it's just my emotional state that is giving me a low performance review, which is leading to me getting a smaller bonus. Like, what's going on here? I mean, how am I? Do you want me to be emotionally expressive? And I'll give you some other ridiculous feedback I got back later. Now, lesson number 2, and this is actually a very important term, the state of exception. Now, you can look up the term. It comes up in right-wing political philosophy, the state of exception. And what that means is, who is the exception to the rule? And whoever is the exception to the rule is allowed to get away with things because they have power that's unspoken. So for example, if someone's always allowed to leave late, arrive late to work, that means they've got a lot of power, whatever that power would be. Maybe they're using the excuse of picking up their kids from school, dropping them off at school, or their senior manager likes them, so they can always arrive late for work and no one's going to question it. Or you've got a team member who's going to the workplace gym for like an hour to 2 hours when everyone else has to be at their desk all the time. You've got another co-worker who's allowed to have long lunch breaks. That's because they have some kind of social power that you might not have or others don't have. So if you want to know who has the power, what is the exception that applies to them that doesn't apply to everyone else? This guy could shout, swear, insult people because he had the backing of senior management, right? And they saw him as someone who's a loyalist to them. Even though he might come across scruffy and not look like someone who could be fit for senior management, he was loyal to them like a loyal lapdog, a loyal kind of pit bull or guard dog for them, giving them a lot of technical analysis so they look good to their senior management. That's why he had power. So if you're in a corporate environment, lesson number 2 here is to look to who has that power and why that have that power, right? So in those situations, you could consider, do you want to adjust accordingly or leave? Do you want to put up with their BS or do you want to leave? And it does depend on the company you're working for. What's your long-term career strategy? Do you want to just stay there for like 2 to 3 years and then job hop? Or do you think you might stay there long enough to move to another part of the team and be able to avoid that person? So the thing is, like I said, you've got to look out for those patterns, right? If everyone has to arrive early, for example, on a Monday, and then you've got other people who are allowed to arrive late, that might mean they've got some leverage there, right? And another thing to look out for just in general is notice the patterns of conformity, right? So if everyone's allowed to, leave early on a Friday, make sure you leverage that to your advantage. Don't be someone who's going to, I'm going to stay late and do the right thing and leave on time. Understand the general patterns of conformity. What are the exceptions? How does that work? How are people leveraging that? Like in other work experiences I mentioned before in my videos, we had a co-worker who was a working mother who could arrive late on Monday and Tuesday to drop off her kids at school. And I've seen that enough times, and she wasn't doing a ton of work, that one time or a couple of times I used the excuse, on Thursday I have to pick up my nephew from school, so I have to leave early. And they accepted it because they can't say one employee can do it and another employee can't. That would be discrimination, right, or bias. So I managed to get that. Now we're going to go back into like other experiences of working with this guy, right? Now, one time, like I say, earlier in the first few months of starting to work with him, he called me a prick, right? Because I did some analysis for him and it's quite a short email to a question he had. He didn't clarify the level of detail or analysis he wanted. He just started cursing me out. And then I let that go, right? Another time, I was just doing my job and I don't know what it was that triggered him. He just called me an asshole, right? And I was thinking, okay, this is the second time he's insulted me in something that would be inappropriate in the workplace. So I kept quiet at the moment, but I'm the type of person where like I highly value self-respect, right? And I'm going to cover this in the lesson in a few minutes, but I don't know. I just don't put up with that. Now, I know people have different opinions on what they'd be willing to accept, particularly if you're working for a big billion-dollar investment bank or a major company. If you're working in the big tech firms, for example, or a major law firm, you'd be willing to put up with a bit more nonsense than maybe others in other roles, right? But so at that point, I was just keeping quiet and I thought, I can't put up with this anymore, right? I can't be put up with being insulted and just being like, oh, he's just an over-emotional guy and it's just the way he is. So then I didn't realize this, but at the time, Paddle Ping, who's our top manager in that team, he was coming back to the desk and I confronted Mickey Goofball about what he just said to me. And I said, you can't talk to me like I'm a stray dog who just wandered into the office, right? I'm here as an employee, right? And he didn't know how to respond because he was so used to putting on the fake act in front of senior management. He was so used to pretending to be fake nice with me and others. And I confronted him in front of the manager And the manager's like, oh, what's happened, right? And then he had to go and have a chat with him and say, oh, sorry, I called him an asshole, called me an asshole, even though I shouldn't have. That's what he said. He said to him, the manager, Paddle Ping and Mickey Goofball had this conversation. Then he came back to the desk and he was like, oh, I'm sorry about it. I apologize to the manager too. And this is the type of like insincere apology where it's like, you just got caught. It's like, you know, when someone apologizes for stealing or lying or swearing, whatever, after they got caught, they don't really mean that, right? And there's so many examples of this. It's like, if you deal with this outside of work too, people who apologize only when they get found out, right? So I was just like, oh, okay, then he didn't like that. And then he had a go at me for calling him out in front of management. And then this was a Friday afternoon, right? And there wasn't much work going on, but I was doing what work I had to do, right? And then he dragged me to an office off the trading floor. And for 2 hours on a Friday night, he berated me. He just basically threatened me for 2 hours again and again that, you know, firstly, he complained because he wanted to go to drinks with his friends from another bank. There was another investment bank where we're located, another major UK investment bank, which I won't name. He was going to go on drink sessions with them because that's where he used to work and where his friends are. And it's so funny how a lot of these co-workers, they see his drink sessions as essential networking. Like their job stability in the industry depends on their social circle, right? So he was like, oh, I'm missing this drink session with my co-workers from my previous company, you know, and you know, he was like, oh, it's so important. But it was just getting drunk on a Friday with previous co-workers, right? But I understand from his perspective, his survival in the industry depends on it. Now, he basically threatened me in one way or another that I'm very junior in the role, and he threatened to fire me again and again. Oh, you're nothing in this role. You're at analyst level. You're not gonna make it anywhere. And he just basically threatening to fire me and give negative feedback to management. That's like I was a junior who could be easily replaced. And it was kind of awkward because he kept going on different awkward tangents about his personal life, because he's so committed to his job. You know, he's like, oh, I might not have a girlfriend or a stable family, but I'm super focused on my job. And then he kind of dropped different things that I picked up on later or around the time. You know, he was kind of dependent on, you know, excessive drinking of alcohol, smoking cigarettes in the smoking section by the office. You know, he's always drinking a lot of coffee. That's why he always seemed to be on edge, or having zine, which is those nicotine pouches that you're probably aware of throughout the day at work. Sometimes he'd take other, you know, stimulants and nootropics, you know, like creatine, not for weightlifting, but for the mental impacts of focus and things like that. He always seemed perpetually overstimulated, and that's what put him overreactive to everything, right? Over emotional, perpetually on edge. And he was always trying to climb the social ladder, right? Always trying to suck up to someone else in the office, leverage them to get ahead in life. And it became quite cringe and awkward, to be honest. And I didn't know what to do in that situation. Imagine 2 hours on a Friday night, your managers threatening to fire you, talking about their insecurities, about they don't have the ideal life and they're working on things. And it's like, how am I even meant to respond to that, right? It's like, I was like, and then it's so awkward. This is how awkward it got. I said, yeah, no, I do respect you in your position, but I do respect you. I actually had to say that, and I find this quite awkward. Like, what you meant to say to someone directly? No, but he said something like, oh, I don't respect him in his role. And bear in mind, I've only been there a few months. I'm just trying to do my job. I'm not trying to pander to your emotions. But then I've been backed into a corner where, no, I do respect you in your job. He's like, no, you don't respect me. I'm like, no, I do respect you. I'm listening to you now. I respect what you have to say. So, I mean, what are you meant to do in that situation, right? And then he goes on about, you know, I realized this type of over-emotional state that a lot of these archetype, the liberal men, whatever you want to call them, like I say, the soy boys, the bug man, whatever you want to call them, they have all this kind of self-righteous posturing about whatever they believe, but they're really kind of these shaky guys with no stability, the champagne socialist type of guy, right? The type of effeminate type of guy you see, the male feminist archetype. They don't have that strong foundation of who they are as a man, and it plays out in all these weird ways. So, and then I think it comes down to the key thing is that, and this is lesson number 3 from the video, self-respect is way more important than social status. And that's what I learned in that scenario, because we have to look back on life lessons when you had less leverage, maybe earlier in your career, and like, how can I learn from that? Even though I didn't want to be in that position, for me, is that self-respect mattered more than social status. And I think that differed from that guy. That was a core difference in our values. I was all about self-respect. working decent work hours, doing good quality work, but I'm not going to perpetually desperately seek external validation. I'm not going to insult and put people down. He was always about maintaining his social status above others, one-upping his co-worker at the same level, stabbing them in the back or in the front in some of these meetings. And I realized, why do people hate you? Why did he have this resentment towards me specifically? So many people, they hate you because they can't control you. And this is important to note with toxic managers, other personalities like this. They hate you because they can't control you. And it's that simple, right? Why does someone hate you for the clothes you wear? Probably because they can't control what you're wearing, right? Why do they hate you for your opinions? Because they can't control your opinions. And I've dealt with this throughout all avenues of life. People hate you because they can't control you, right? And then going on to lesson 4, right? So I found out because I asked around about who used to do my role. And this is what I mean. When you're at the work, and I've covered this in other videos, you have to work and think like a spy. You're always gathering information to fill in all the gaps, all the blind spots you have in your analysis of the dynamics around you. So for example, I was curious to other coworkers, so who actually used to do my role on the team, or was it a brand new role, right? And it turns out the person who used to do my role actually had the same problems with Mickey Goofball. The person who used to do my role, Mickey Goofball, was arguing with him so often, and it was a 2-person team, Mickey Goofball and this other guy, the previous person, the ex-employee who used to do my role. He actually couldn't sit next to him, right? Because it was such a argumentative work relationship. So the manager, Paddle Ping, had to sit in between these 2 employees. On one hand, he had Mickey Goofball. On another hand, he had the ex-employee. And these 2 guys were meant to be working together, sitting next to each other, discussing all the very stressful financial discussions they were going to be having about managing the company's financial risk. But they couldn't work together effectively. And all the other team members, the entire team was split into 2 or 3 people each. We had about a 20-person team, but 2 to 3 small teams within that, covering credit, foreign exchange, credit trading, whatever it would be. Now, the whole point is that these 2 guys couldn't work together because Mickey Goofball has this personality that people are just expected to put up with. Now, if I knew that in advance, I might have double guessed or really thought carefully if I want to join this role, even though it's a big company and it's worthwhile having that on my resume. Now, this is what I mean. This childish behavior from this man-child, right, Mickey Goofball, it's like he's a grown adult, but people have to treat him like an over-emotional toddler, and everyone has to put up with it because I guess he has good technical skills and sucks up to management. Now, many people were kind of dropping hints about Mickey's behavior, right, throughout the interactions with him or brief comments with me, but they all made the effort to get on quite well with him, and they all gave him the attention and validation he needed. Even people at more junior levels at that time, at analyst or associate level, and he was at vice president level. So everyone's always playing into his emotions, what he needs. He wants to vent about his personal life. He wants some attention and things like that. It was kind of weird. It's like we're meant to manage this guy's behavior. And I realized part of the reason he had an issue with me is that he couldn't manipulate me that way, right? He couldn't get me to lean into his temper tantrums. Those weren't my problems to deal with. I'm not here to deal with his emotions. I'm not here to give him the attention and validation he needs. And what's funny is the guy who used to do the role, he went to another company, worked there for a year or so, and he returned back to this major investment bank. But he didn't want to work with Mickey Goofball. He went to another part of the business, basically, right? And he was doing quite well, working at very senior roles, very senior people. So it's not like that other person was bad at doing their job. It's not like I was bad at doing my job. There's a reoccurring issue that Mickey is creating problems with lots of people he's working with. So, there's so many other funny stories I can mention here. Another one, this is really funny to me. Mickey Goofball was on good terms with a female employee. Now, they weren't in a relationship or going out or anything. They were dating other people. And just trust me when I say there wasn't like anything going in between them. It was obvious there wasn't, right? But they were both talking about traveling and things like this. And she said, she always wanted to visit Montenegro. And he said, that would be good. Yeah, we should go sometime. So she ends up booking her own flight and trip to Montenegro on the basis that he was going to do the same. And they were going to go on a trip as friendly co-workers to Montenegro for a relatively moderate price, right? I don't know how much you'd be able to estimate around, $600 total, right? Each per person for the hotel, flights, and everything else. And what ends up happening is she books everything, and then last minute he backs out. And it was so funny that he backed out because she'd already paid for everything. She can't get the money back. And then she went to speak with him. It's like, oh, why you haven't booked the trip we agreed, on these specific dates? I've taken time off work. I've booked the flights and the hotel. And he backed off last minute. And the whole point is, this is how ridiculously manipulative this guy is. Because he's like sucking up to people. Yeah, we'll go together. Let's agree all the details. And then last minute he backs out because he's not really that friendly with her. He's just pretending, right? To the point where he gets someone else to book a holiday and he backs out and says, I'm not going to go. And then when she pointed this out to him to get her back, because he's more senior than her, Mickey would dump loads of work on her with a last minute deadline because he was like, oh, I don't like the way she spoke to me. She's having a go at me now. I mean, this is the type of retarded behavior that you got to put up with. And then our manager at the time, Paddle Ping, he basically, intervened and said, you can't be doing this. You can't be dumping extra work on her because you're emotionally overreacting about a holiday that you agreed to go on with her. It was just so ridiculous. There are the instances where he walked directly into my shoulder after I had a shoulder surgery a few months before that I mentioned to him. It's ridiculous. We're going to go into that in another video. But this guy had a recurring pattern of these type of issues. And something that really stood out to me is this type of passive-aggressive behavior. When we went on a team picnic, to Hemel Hempstead, West Hempstead. There's a park there, Hemel Hempstead Park, I think it is. And we had a team picnic. Now, because these guys, they're so weak, they can't address their actual issues directly. It's very indirect and passive-aggressive. He was talking about some story and he was like, oh, sometimes someone's working a job and then they hire a cheap Indian to replace them. And there was an awkward silence because I'm ethnically Indian and no one else was. I think one other person was, but he wasn't around at the time. And it was obvious he was indirectly referring to me. And then everyone kind of laughed along with it. And what I realized, firstly, is there's so many double standards here. Because I know he wouldn't be able to say, allowed to say that joke about black people or Muslims or even women, right? Because there's a certain demographic, or even, the Jewish community, right? But you can make that joke about Indians, hiring cheap Indians, because there's just not the same standard applied to everyone, right? And he could make that little comment, even though he's a self-righteous liberal who believes in equality and racial equality and gender equality and whatever else, right? It's this type of thing where there's so many different red flags. And like I say, if you're someone of my demographic, you're not really on the receiving end of some of that favorable treatment. So it was like a major red flag to me, right? It's like, what biases exist? We have to be pro-woman, pro-liberal, pro-left-wing, pro-racial equality, but then there's still like underlying exceptions to that if you want to have a go at Indians, or for example, right? And that's kind of a lesson number 4, right? You want to learn who previously did the role, right? You can ask politely, what is that person doing now? And I've done that in other roles where if I ask, who used to do my role? Are they still at the company in another role? Or they moved on, and if they moved on, and you can read in between the lines, right? Start reading in between the lines. Why did someone leave the role? Maybe they just weren't getting promoted, so they went somewhere else. Were they going to another internal role? Does that mean there's a lack of kind of career progression in this current job where you're not going to learn much? You're just going to be doing basic office tasks. Were they unhappy with the role? You got to do a bit of digging. And people are so talkative in the office, they end up leaking out all this information you think they wouldn't. Or there'll be an awkward silence. You can kind of pick up on things, right? And were they getting too much work in the role? Whatever was going on, you try to dig into a bit of information without saying those questions directly. And to just give you a final point of how much Mickey got away with his ridiculous conduct, when he was speaking with Paddle Ping in a previous meeting, and Mickey told me this himself, he would sometimes curse out the manager and call him an idiot, right? He was like, oh, you're an idiot for not giving me a pay rise. Now, no one would call their manager an idiot and get away with it, but this guy did, right? And what I realized, he really likes to push people's boundaries, and this sets a precedent, right? Like, everyone puts up with his disrespect apart from me, and that's why he was having an issue with me, because everyone else would put up with it, and they like push people's boundaries, and they're just you know, not lean into his emotional kind of provocation. They would just like play along with it, like, oh yeah, cool. And I'd just be like, well, if you're gonna insult me, I'm not gonna put up with it. Even at that stage in my career, I was like getting fed up with these type of people. So I went over all those type of issues. I'm gonna summarize the 4 key lessons, and then we're gonna move on to another video when I go through exactly what it's like dealing with this guy in year 1, year 2, year 3, and before I left the company. So lesson number 1, what signs can you pick up on people in the interview phase, right? Are they generally negative? What is the tone of voice? Is it coming across quite stressful? What role who's your manager? What role could a negative person in the interview process play in your day-to-day activity? You don't have to ask that directly, but you'd be able to gauge like, okay, this is where I sit on the team. This is the size of the team. This is the projects we'll be working on together. Is it going to take up a lot of my day or a little bit of my day? Lesson number 2 is what is the state of exception, and what does that mean? Who gets away with what when you start the job, right? So do people, certain women maybe allowed to leave early to pick up their kids, certain guys have maybe longer lunch breaks because they're the manager's favorite. What's going on? Who has the power, the social power in the office to be the exception, right? Who can swear and shout and get away with it? Lesson number 3 is you have to view this yourself, right? What's more important to you, self-respect or social status? And let me know in the comments, because I can tell from, you know, my audience and what I say, if you relate to my story, self-respect matters a lot more to you than social status. And you got to remember that people hate you in the corporate environment like a toxic manager because they can't control you. And it's really that simple. People hate you because they can't control you. That's the main reason. Now, number 4 is learn about who previously did the role, right? Because if you learn about who previously did the role, like I mentioned before, you might see certain patterns, whether they're not getting promoted, they don't want to deal with difficult people, they're unhappy with being overworked, they're leaving to another company, or they're staying at the company in another role. It probably means they like the company culture, they just wanted more pay, or maybe they wanted to do something different because the work was getting stale. You'll be able to pick up on a lot of this, right? And what type of conduct people are doing around you, you'll pick up on all of these things. That's a very interesting summary. Like I say, I am someone who worked at Goldman Sachs, although this story definitely didn't happen at Goldman Sachs. I'm just an ex-Goldman Sachs genius. I'm still a genius. I just used to work at Goldman Sachs, just for the record. So this is a story generally about what happened in the corporate environment at other companies I worked at, of course. And let me know if you want to work together, because I work as a career coach and I help my clients over the course of 12 weeks help them outsmart office politics, increase their salary, take control of their career, deal with toxic managers, and make as much money as possible to protect their reputation and pursue financial freedom and build a career they actually want. Schedule a call with me now to speak with me, and let me know in the comments how you feel about this. 2 recommended videos on the screen right now, and I'll see you next time.